Hear me okay and see me okay? Check 1, 2. Cool. Hey, everybody. All right, awesome. What we're going to do today, this is the acoustic guitar workshop, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to show you some things related to the acoustic guitar to try and get your playing a little more authentic and maybe a little bit more creative. I always think there's a lot of things that we do as guitar players where we practice fundamental elements, which is really important to do, you know, like scales and chords and theory and things like that. But oftentimes we forget to spend some time practicing creative stuff, which is really important. And so I'm going to make a mixture of those today in this workshop. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to talk about dynamics. Now, most of you know I'm very much an electric guitar player, right? It's not that I don't play acoustic. I play acoustic quite frequently. But if I had to define myself as one or the other, I think I play electric more than I play acoustic, just for the styles of music that I tend to play and things like that. But the single most important thing about the acoustic guitar that the electric guitar can never replicate is its ability to create natural dynamics. You know, with an electric guitar, you can turn down the volume or you can strum a little softer and that sort of thing, or a little louder, of course. But the acoustic guitar just has this wonderful dynamic space, if you will, that just makes it unbelievable. And so the first thing I want you to really be thinking about when it comes to acoustic guitar is not just that you are making rhythm or that you're strumming. That's what we often refer to as strumming. It's not just that. It's the way that you're strumming. It's the variations of your strum that you're putting in there, because it makes all the difference in the world. I've always heard, when I was a kid, I always heard that, you know, the greatest lead players were really great rhythm players, right? Or the way to become a really great lead guitar player is to become a really great rhythm guitar player. And there's 100% truth in that, because your availability of being able to not only express yourself with the instrument, which is that creative thing I was talking about, but play it with confidence and with authority is what really makes the difference. So it's not what style of music that you're learning how to play, or whether it's electric or whether it's acoustic or whatever it might be, fast or slow. All of that stuff is kind of irrelevant. It's the availability of being able to make yourself sound authentic, okay? So if we think about it, when I go to play this, okay, let's just take a G chord, for instance. I'm just playing a 4-finger G here. And if you play your G differently than me or something, don't worry about it. It's perfectly fine for now, okay? Now we're going to go into great detail on strumming and rhythm and groove and all those sorts of things in the course, but let me give you some tips. So the first thing is understanding that when you go to strum, right, we're given, whatever situation we find ourselves in, we're given a tempo, right? So let's say our tempo is this. Okay, that's our tempo. We're going to be going right there. Okay, so then I go to strum over this. Now what I want to be aware of is the fact that I've got all those down strums, but I don't necessarily want to strum all of them, and I don't want to strum them all with the same dynamic level. Okay, and then of course I've got my up strums in between. So if I'm doing this, my ups would be . So one thing I want you to really think about, and I know it seems simple, but it is so important to the success of making your guitar sound authentic, is not just understanding that, again, from that logical perspective, you know, quarter notes and eighth notes and sixteenths and downs and ups. That's important. That's the rudimentary practice, right? But what I want you to do is just take some time out of your day and just practice strumming and exploring all of the variants that you have when you strum this guitar at this tempo, or whatever tempo it is you choose. What I think about and you might have heard me talk about this before, but I call it organic strumming, and then within that I call it ocean strumming. Now what happens is, with organic strumming is you're not really thinking about the guitar in terms of a strumming pattern, like down, 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 up, down. Okay, those all exist. There's mathematical possibilities for all of these different things that you can do with downs and ups, things like that, putting them in different places. It's not really that. What you're doing is you're just learning how to move away from the guitar and then move back into the guitar at random points in time. And what you're doing is almost thinking about it like phrasing if you were a singer or if you were soloing. You're trying to make it different each time. Okay, so maybe you're strumming a little bit more and then you're strumming a little bit less. Maybe you're strumming a little bit harder and then you're strumming a little bit softer in different places. So what I think about is if we were to eliminate the chord entirely and just scratch, okay, so my mind is completely focused on strumming, on rhythm, on groove. It's not worrying about whether the chord sounds great or whatever that might be. I'm just focusing on my availability of being able to create something interesting. That's what organic strumming is to me, is that you're just naturally letting things come out, okay? So if I was to take this and just start kind of putting my down ups where they were, right here, but what I do is I start moving away and coming back in at various different points in time. And that also includes up strums, not always starting on a down strum, but learning to kind of accentuate those up strums at different times. So I might be going like this. See how I hit that up? Now I'm not aware, I'm not thinking down, up. I'm not thinking about it that way. I'm just thinking, that's what I'm thinking in my head. And my hand is hitting at various points in time here. Now, I can also hit different groups of strings at different points in time. Like I always kind of think about my pick is really, I'm either hitting everybody, or what I'm doing is I'm kind of breaking the guitar into three different kind of sections. I've got the top, the middle, and the bottom toward the floor. Now, there's no exactness to this. It's just the different sounds that I can get. That I can strum at different points in time. So again, this is a creative process that you want to learn to spend time with, and it's not exciting, right? It's not that one guitar lick that you think is going to put you over the edge and it's just going to be the most amazing thing. After you've been playing for a while, you realize that these fundamental elements are the things that carry you through all. I mean, I can't even tell you how many musical situations I found myself in, and it's not just because of my availability of being able to explain some mode. It's not that. It's my availability to play. I hear and I respond, right? And if I'm with a group of people, which is what we call a band, right? I get the gig or don't get the gig for my availability of being able to sort of merge into what it is that they're doing. That's what this whole thing is about. So when I go to play, now I can add that G chord in and keep all of these different things kind of connected to that. And of course, the tempo might be a little bit different. My groove might be different depending on what the other instruments are doing, but I'm aware of my availability to be able to move in and out or away from those strings at different points in time. Instead of going for 4 minutes, right? Because that might get old for you and it might get old for your listener. So you really want to learn to think about that. Rhythm is far more important than people give it the credit that it deserves, and the time that it needs to nurture that. When I was learning how to play, I was completely guilty of this because I was learning from a Mel Bay book, if any of you know what Mel Bay is. I was learning from a Mel Bay book, and the emphasis wasn't on strumming. It would have some strumming patterns in there, but the concept of creating rhythm didn't focus on that at all. So I never thought about that. I would just go. and wonder why my playing sounded so boxy, right? It sounded so, you know, I don't know. It just didn't sound authentic. And that's why, is because I wasn't adding anything authentic. I was just playing by the numbers, really, is what I was doing. So I want you to really think about that. Now, let's go back to what I said about ocean strumming. I call it ocean strumming because sometimes it makes it easier for you to think about in your head. But if you were to go somewhere, if you don't live near the ocean, I don't live near the ocean. If you go to the ocean and you just sit and watch the waves of an ocean, right? It's pretty mesmerizing. Not only what you're seeing, but what you're hearing, because it's unpredictable. It's not like it's, you know, a sine wave or something like that that's consistent. It's not. Sometimes the waves are big, sometimes they're little, sometimes there's a lot of them, sometimes there's just a few of them. You know, depending on what the wind is doing, sometimes they can be really aggressive and then all of a sudden it'll get calm. And I always think about strumming as kind of being that. So if I was to take, for instance, a G chord and a D chord and a C chord and then back to a G chord. And you can kind of do this with me, okay? If you've got your guitar handy, and if you're at work or something, obviously you can you know, try this later. But you know, if you've got your guitar handy and you want to play along with me here, we can certainly do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I'm going to play G 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, D 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, C 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, G 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Okay? Only we're going to do that a little slower, just so it doesn't feel so rushed for you. So I'm going to go. But again, I know I've got upstrums in between those. And again, I could play a strumming pattern. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Sometimes we need strumming patterns to fix a situation that we find ourselves in, or we're just not feeling something and we need a pattern. What I'm saying is this is what you want to work toward, and this is what the guitar course is going to focus on, is training you to really think about music from the creative perspective, not just, you know, strumming patterns and chord changes, playing kind of by route, if you will. Okay? So let's take that now. I'm going to think 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right there. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to try and kind of organic strum. And what I want you to do is sort of turn your brain off and just kind of let the arm move back and forth, like kind of like a maraca, right? It just kind of moves back and forth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move in, and I'm going to move out, and I'm going to move in at different points in time, and I'm going to move out. So I'm not consciously thinking about which downs or ups I'm going to hit. I'm trying to let my intuition and my availability, being able to hear music, and again, this might take time. I don't know. You know, you've got to try this. But I'm going to try and let that kind of take over as I play. And don't worry if you're not hearing things. Maybe just the ability of being able to be random might start clicking in your brain, and you'll start hearing it going, oh yeah, I kind of get what he's talking about. So you don't have to have it all planned out. It's not like all of us have all of this planned out before we begin. You just learn to feel it as you go. So here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Now, if you find when you practice that it's really hard for you to do, what you could do is simply avoid the chord changes, just pick one chord and just practice that, okay? Now, what I like about that section thing I was telling you about the top, the middle, and the bottom, right, is that if you're on a D chord, for instance, you can use that to your advantage, because instead of strumming the whole guitar and hitting some strings you don't want, you just direct your pick toward the middle or the bottom. Again, the bottom thinking toward the floor here. You kind of direct your pick that way in your mind, so you're not worried about whether you're hitting 4 strings all the time on a D chord. Obviously, ideally, that's what you want, but that doesn't always happen for any of us. So you just kind of hit at random places here. Sometimes you hit more than 4. Sometimes I hit the 5th string. Heck, sometimes I probably hit the 6th string, right? I'm just not doing this. that sounds awful, right? So again, instead of being panicked and thinking you have to hit 4 strings all the time, you start thinking about the guitar as kind of sections that you can hit different places. Maybe you hit sections middle and bottom together, and you're just avoiding the top. So you're kind of breaking the guitar in half, if you will. Top, bottom. And that's okay too. That might help you as well. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, let me check my notes on my phone. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's say we start developing that. And again, I want you to understand that this isn't a, okay, I'm going to practice this Tuesday and then I'm done, or Thursday or whatever it might be. What I want you to think about is that it's something that you do every day, because the more you can develop that strum, I have found the more opportunities I get for doing recordings and performances and things like that, because I'm able to keep a really steady. I had one producer tell me one time that I had the my timing was like AC/DC. It was just like a rock. It was solid, and that was one of the nicest compliments I ever got, because you know, I take pride in my availability of being able to drive a song for people to play along with or to sing along with or whatever it might be. You know, as a guitar player, you're not always driving the song. Sometimes the drummer is. Not all the time, though. I mean, different songs require different things. And some songs you let the singer lead, right? Because maybe the song can use some tempo changes with that singer, and so you're playing in back, you're kind of following that singer. But in order to do that, you've got to be able to listen. You can't just be focusing on, you know, your chord changes in a strumming pattern the whole time and not listen to the musical world that's going on around you. You've got to be able to listen and you know, and kind of bring that along. So never underestimate that and the power that rhythm has. I have a bit of a cold, I'm sorry. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about simple embellishments to your chords to make those a little more exciting, okay? So let's say, for instance, we're going to use the same GCD scenario here. And again, it works for all kinds of different chords. But what I do want to say to you is, if you know anything about guitar playing and you've been playing for a while, if you haven't, don't worry about it. But if you have, you know you've got bar chords and things like that. And bar chords are great because they fill in the gaps of certain chords that you can't play in the open position. But here's the deal, and certainly on acoustic guitar, this is really powerful. Open chords have a certain sound that bar chords do not. Open chords, often referred to as cowboy chords, chords that use open strings, because they're all different shapes like this, and oftentimes you've got fingers that you're not using, right? So you can learn to add those fingers to get different sounds, or subtract fingers you see? And you get different sounds. When you're playing a bar chord, oftentimes all your fingers are being used in some capacity. Not always. I'm just saying that there's a misconception sometimes between open chords and bar chords that, you know, bar chords are more important than open chords, or, you know, open chords are for beginners and bar chords. And none of that is true, which brings me to the capo. What's great about the capo is you can take all of your open chords and move it into a different key and still retain the power of those open chords and all of these embellishments that I'm going to be showing you by simply putting the capo on the guitar and then being able to still do all of these kinds of embellishments. So, you know, when I was growing up, I was always told that the capo was a cheater because you wouldn't have to learn how to play your bar chords, and it always confused me because I'm like, no, I play bar chords when I need bar chords, and I use the capo when I need open chords, but I need to do this stuff, right? Let's say I was playing something like this. I'll take the G here, and I'm going to play this. Right, Wish You Were Here. So I'm playing Wish You Were Here. And then my singer comes along, and maybe my singer oftentimes is my daughter, right? So first of all, she's female, right? So her voice is a little bit higher than the Pink Floyd version would be. So what I would do is go, okay, well, let's go to the 2nd fret here. Okay, let's try that. So now I do the same thing. And I find a key that works for her. And that's beneficial for both of us because for me, I'm not revamping the way I play it. I'm playing it the way I always play it. I'm just playing it somewhere else. Okay? So there's power in learning how to use the capo and still maintain those open chords and all the stuff that you're learning how to do. It's an entirely different thing than learning how to play bar chords, just so you understand that. So let's look at some of these embellishments then. If I was on the D chord, for instance, we have this one right here, which is the pinky. Now, we call this a D sus4, but I don't want you to worry about the names of these. Again, I want you to think more about the creativity of your ability to play than the theory of the names of everything that we're doing. When I was younger and I was learning how to do this stuff, it wasn't because I was studying theory. It's because I was sitting in my room going, I have a pinky that I should try and screw around with and see what I can come up with. So I would sit and go... and think about all the different ways I could add it or take it off, right? I could hammer it, I could pull it, I could just, play it. I could leave it down for a long time or take it off quickly, all these different kinds of things that you can do, but it takes time and practice, right? You just have to sit and explore it. You can't just spend 30 seconds going, okay, I understand that you can add the pinky, now let's move on to something else. It's not that. You've got to learn to use it in your playing. You've got to learn to make it sound authentic and organic. So when you're playing, okay? Another one that's really great to add is your middle finger. What you're going to do is you're going to actually take that finger off the guitar. So you're playing an open first string. That's called a D sus2. Then again, don't stress over the name. I'd rather hear you playing and rocking out on your guitar than telling me the names of these chords. Okay, I'd always rather hear you playing than telling me what you know. Okay, that's always been something that I wish the world would understand. You can write a wonderful book and talk about all the things that you know, and that's wonderful. But when it comes to music, just play. Just let somebody hear you. Let somebody enjoy the music that's coming out of this instrument, out of you, right? So I've got this D sus4 here, or my pinky is added on the guitar, and I've got my middle finger off the guitar, which is called a D sus2. Now I can use those. I don't have to use them both at the same time in the same song. I don't have to use them equal amounts. They're not going to feel bad, right? Sometimes what happens is as we start learning these things, and especially, when you get excited about this sort of thing, I totally get it. But just because we can do something doesn't mean we should overdo it. Sometimes we just learn how to do something and it's just like a spice that goes in food, right? We should just use a little bit of it just for flavoring, but if we use way too much, it kind of kills the taste of everything else. So as we're playing, sometimes we like to use these things a lot. You think of like Led Zeppelin. You see, that's actually part of the little part of Stairway to Heaven. It's kind of the melody for that particular part of the song. You see? And that's great. But then they don't do it for the entire song. It's just a little part in there. So what I always found interesting about these little embellishments, I always call them, is that before I knew that they existed, the only way you got differences in sound was by physically changing chords, right? So you'd play a chord, and then you'd play another chord, and then another chord. And if you didn't change chords, there was nothing happening. It was just sitting on the same chord. So it misled me to believe that you needed all these chord changes because that was the only way you got differences in sound on the guitar. And again, I'm not talking about dynamics. I'm talking about actual pitch differences. The great thing about embellishments is that you can stay on a chord for a long time and it doesn't have to be boring to you or the listener. You see, where if I was just going, now again, there might be somebody singing over the top, but then that's fine because then we've got variation happening. But if nobody's singing, it's just the same chord. But if I start adding in the ear is expecting something. You see? And that becomes more interesting. So it's a really great tool to learn how to do. So over that D, you practice adding the pinky, you practice taking the middle finger off the guitar, and another one that I love to do is taking the first finger here and doing that as a hammer-on. Now, if you use it in a chord, what I would suggest is try to avoid hitting the first string, because if you hit the first string, it becomes harder to hear that note. But if you just hit a couple of strings or 3 strings or something like that, you'll hear it more. And if you're familiar with picking, flat picking, which again, we'll talk about all these things in the course, but if you're familiar with flat picking, you see, then you're really going to notice that particular one a lot more. So it's a little more subtle than the ones on the first string, where those you can definitely use within the context of your strumming. This string needs a little bit more of that happening, where you're maybe picking it as a single note or whatever it might be, okay? Or you're just strumming a few strings to have that happen, okay? So there's all kinds of those. We're going to look at all kinds of different embellishments in the guitar course, but that D is a great place to start. So if you're playing G and you go to D, just that sounds really nice. So I'm playing G and then going over to D. Okay? Lots of things like that you can do. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you, we're going to touch on here, is learning how to explore more creative chords by moving your chords around the guitar. And this is something that I love to do. So let's say, for instance, and there's lots of ways that you can do this. Like the D is one of the ones I always show people, because if you think of the song Wholehearted by Extreme, you see this moving around all over the place, where he'll take the D, move it up a whole step, then you move up another fret by going like this. And you can get lots of really great sounds by simply taking a chord and moving it around. And you just, again, have to explore the sounds. Let me go back to this for a second. This is a great example. If I took this D chord and I added the pinky on right here, most of us would agree that it sounds pretty normal, right? Whether you like it or not is entirely up to you, but it's not dissonant at all, right? But let's say I took that pinky and I added it in 1 fret higher just by exploring, because I'm in my creative space, I'm exploring my guitar, and I do this. Now, you might either be thinking that sounds horrible, or you're thinking that sounds pretty cool. For me, I love the sound of that. I think it sounds really neat. I like the dissonance of that sound. Now, I never would have done that if it hadn't occurred to me to explore. If I just did the matter-of-factly, my teacher said, or I read somewhere, or whatever it might be, that you can add this and then you're done, you'll never know that that sound even exists unless you spend a little time exploring it. So again, please understand, the bigger picture here is that you've got elements that you practice on a daily basis to get better. Rudimentary elements, we can call those. Technical elements, whatever you want to call it. But if you never spend time just exploring things, you're going to miss out on a whole lot of really great stuff that happens with the acoustic guitar and all the sounds that it makes and all the feels that you make when you strum it, right? You're going to miss out on those if you never try things. So you might take that wholehearted idea, that extreme idea, and try and go, And you might love it or you might hate it, and it's okay. You just have to explore things and see what you come up with. One that I like to show people is I wrote a song quite a few years ago where I used a D and an A, and the song was in the key of A. Okay, so I was going from the D to the A, but I didn't want that traditional kind of sound. So what I did was I took the C chord and moved it up a whole step so it was a D of sorts. See how it sounds a little less resolved? But then going to that A sounds kind of strange. You see? So I didn't want to go to the traditional A either, so what I did was I took the E chord and I moved the E up until it becomes an A of sorts. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So I went from this D of sorts to this A. Okay, and there I just did E, added my pinky underneath on the third string here on the second fret, and then I actually moved up and went 0, 2, 2, 4, 0, 0. Now again, there's a million ways that you can do this sort of thing on the guitar. I'm just trying to show you that there's more than you might realize going on when you play. You know, when you first start learning how to play, you have to start with basics. You have to learn how to play a D before you can embellish a D, right? But be aware that there's so many wonderful things that you could be doing on top of the traditional practice. Because I hear people all the time say, well, I get bored with practice or I get bored with playing. That doesn't need to happen. You just have to learn to step outside your thought process and think about some different ways that you can approach some of the things that you're learning how to do. And all of these things just lend themselves so beautifully to the sound of the acoustic guitar and our availability to be able to strum and pick. You see, all those kind of things are just amazing. So